It's Christmas morning, and I'm standing in my old bedroom surrounded by boxes watching my dad's face go pale. He's staring at his phone. My mom is clutching my brother Brandon's arm, and he's whispering frantically, something about damage control. My acceptance letter to Georgetown University is sitting right on my desk, right next to a printed email. Just 24 hours ago, my parents threatened to stop paying for college unless I apologized to Brandon for calling him out on his cheating. I just smiled and said, fine. Now they're all realizing they seriously underestimated their good daughter. My name is Jessica, and until 3 days ago I thought my brother Brandon was perfect. He's 25, graduated with top honors from Harvard Med, and was doing his residency at Massachusetts General Hospital. Me, I was just a junior at our local state school, struggling through my biochemistry degree, while my parents never stopped reminding me how I could never be as good as their golden boy. It's been like that in our family since we were kids. Brandon got all the praise, the money, and they truly believed he could do no wrong. I got the leftovers and was constantly compared to him, which always made me feel worthless. When Brandon won the state science fair in high school, my parents threw him a huge party. When I got second place in the same competition, 2 years later, they barely mentioned it over takeout pizza. But all of that changed 3 nights before Christmas. I was working late at the university library, finishing my thesis on protein synthesis. I'd been researching for months, and I'd made some real breakthroughs in cellular regeneration that even my professors were excited about. I was scrolling through some new medical journals to make sure my work was original, and then I saw something that made my stomach drop. There, published in the Journal of Medical Research under Brandon's name, was a whole section of my thesis. I mean word for word. Not similar ideas, not a coincidence. My exact sentences, my exact methods, my own original conclusions about enzymes. The publication date was 6 months ago, which meant Brandon had somehow gotten my work before I'd even shown it to my advisor. My hands were shaking, but I kept digging. The more I searched, the worse it got. That groundbreaking research paper of Brandon's, the one that got him that competitive fellowship, had 3 whole pages of my undergraduate work in it. The protein pathways I had spent so many nights mapping out were now credited to my brother, getting him praise while I was struggling. In the background, I printed everything out, my mind racing as it all started to click. If Brandon was stealing my current work, what else had he taken credit for? I thought back to how his grades suddenly shot up in high school. His weird ability to come up with amazing science projects, even though he spent all his time playing video games. The next morning, I went to talk to Brandon alone in his old bedroom, which is basically a shrine to himself. Medical journals, framed diplomas, and awards were all over the place. I just laid the evidence on his desk. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. We need to talk about your article in the Journal of Medical Research, I said, pointing to the parts I'd highlighted. This is my work, Brandon, my thesis, my research, my words. Brandon glanced at the papers, then at me, and just laughed. Actually laughed. Jessica, you're being crazy. This is how research works. And besides, nobody's going to believe that you came up with this first. I'm the one with the Harvard degree and the medical career. I have timestamps on all my files, I said, pulling out my laptop, showing him the emails, the document history, all of it proving I wrote this months before you published it. You got into my university account, and you stole my work. His laugh died, and his face got cold. Look, little sis, you're just jealous of my success. It's sad, really. Maybe you should just focus on your own small-time achievements instead of trying to wreck mine. And if you're thinking about making a scene, just remember I'm about to be a doctor, and you're still just struggling through your undergrad classes. Who do you really think people are going to believe? The way he said it so cruel, it felt like a punch. This was my brother, the guy I'd looked up to my entire life, just trashing not only my work, but my entire worth. He leaned back in his chair, totally smug and sure of himself. Besides, he added, if you cause any problems for me, I'll just tell Mom and Dad you're having some kind of breakdown. They already think you're the unstable one. One word from me about your mental health, and they'll have you in therapy before you can even say plagiarism. I just stood there, letting his words sink in, feeling my whole world start to crumble. The brother I worshipped wasn't just a fraud. He was willing to ruin me to protect his lies. The parents who raised me were so blinded by how much they favored him that they'd take his word over cold, hard proof. That evening, at our big family Christmas Eve dinner, I decided what to do. Brandon was telling everyone these grand stories about his medical residency, soaking up all their praise. My parents were just beaming. Every so often they'd look at me, and their faces just screamed disappointment in having such a normal daughter. Brandon's research is being considered for another really big journal, my mother announced to the whole table. The hospital thinks his work on protein synthesis could totally change how they do things. Protein synthesis. My work, my discoveries, my future. I cleared my throat and stood up. Actually, I'd like to say something about Brandon's research. I had already made copies of everything, organizing it all with highlighted comparisons and timestamps. Brandon's so-called groundbreaking work on protein synthesis is amazing because it's a direct copy of my undergraduate thesis, which I wrote 6 months before his was published. The table went dead silent. I passed around the packets of evidence, watching my family look at the side-by-side proof. The similarities were obvious right down to the technical terms that I personally came up with. Brandon's face went from shock, anger, and scheming before he landed on hurt and innocent. I can't believe this, he said, his voice cracking just a little. My own sister is so jealous of me that she's making things up to try and destroy my career. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Jessica's been having a hard time in school and with friends, and I think all the stress is really getting to her. He turned to our parents, his eyes getting watery. I've been trying to help her, telling her she should talk to someone, but instead she cooks up this wild story where I somehow stole her work. It's just heartbreaking to see my little sister this confused. My mom immediately went to comfort Brandon, while my dad's face got hard as stone looking at me. The proof was right there on the table, clear and solid, but they were already choosing to believe Brandon's big act over the actual facts. Jessica Marie Mitchell, my father said, using my full name in that tone that used to scare me to death as a kid. I am absolutely disgusted by this. Your brother has worked his butt off to build his career, and instead of being happy for him, you're trying to tear him down with a bunch of lies. Dad, look at the proof, though. Timestamps the document history. That's enough, he snapped. Brandon is a Harvard grad doing his medical residency. You're a struggling college kid who obviously can't handle her brother's success. This jealousy and these fake stories end right now. My mother knotted her arm tight around Brandon's shoulders. Sweetie, we love you, but this isn't okay. Brandon has earned every single thing he's gotten through his own hard work and brains. These crazy theories have to stop. The rest of the family just shifted in their seats, looking awkward, not sure if they should check the evidence or just follow my parents' lead. My grandfather, who's an engineer, actually picked up one of the evidence folders. He's the type who trusts our documents, but my dad shut that down fast. We're not feeding these delusions, Dad announced. Jessica, you will apologize to Brandon this second for these disgusting lies, or we're cutting you off. No more tuition, no more living expenses. Your education is a privilege we give you, and we're not going to pay for someone who attacks our family with lies. The threat just hung in the air, thick and nasty. Brandon watched me, looking all triumphant, but pretending to be concerned. He already knew he'd won. My parents stood there together, ready to ruin my future, to protect their golden boy's lies. I looked around the table at my family, seeing that some looked unsure, and others just looked disappointed. The evidence was sitting right there, plain as day. But the family drama and Brandon's games had created a world where the truth wasn't as important as keeping up their perfect family image. "Well," my mother pushed, "we're waiting for your apology." I felt something just click inside me, a moment where everything became crystal clear. These people would never see Brandon for who he really was, or ever see my value. I could apologize, give in to them, and spend the rest of my life in Brandon's shadow, or I could pick a totally different path. I smiled a real smile for the first time in months. "All right," I said, plain and simple. Then I walked upstairs to my room, leaving them to figure out what that meant. 2 words, however they wanted. Behind me, I heard Brandon starting his whole act about forgiveness and family, healing, totally sure he'd won. My parents were probably already figuring out how to spin this story to make themselves look like saints dealing with their troubled daughter. But as I closed my bedroom door and pulled out my laptop, I was planning something completely different. What my family didn't know as they celebrated Brandon's big win downstairs was that I'd been digging into my brother's academic fraud for 6 months. The protein synthesis theft wasn't the first thing I found. It was just the final piece of the puzzle I needed to complete my case. My suspicions started around Thanksgiving, when Brandon casually mentioned his high school science fair project got a shout out in a medical journal. I remembered that project mostly because I'd helped him with the early research when I was just a freshman. Later, alone in my dorm, I looked up the journal and found something that made my stomach drop. The method Brandon had used was almost identical to a paper published by a grad student at Northwestern University just 2 weeks before our science fair was due. That discovery sent me down a rabbit hole. My entire winter break and countless library hours were spent investigating. I went through every single major academic thing Brandon had claimed since high school, checking his work against research databases and online school archives. What I found was a pattern of stealing that went back 7 years. Brandon didn't just steal my work. He was a professional academic cheat who had built his whole reputation on other people's research. In high school, he'd copied projects from student publications nobody ever read. In college, he submitted slightly changed versions of international research, papers betting his professors wouldn't know any better. In med school, he took group projects and took all the credit by cutting his partners out of the final submissions. The sickest part was how he got his hands on the work he stole. I got a look at some login records from a friend in the university IT department, and I found out Brandon had been hacking into academic accounts for years. He'd gotten into my university account using password info he'd snagged during family visits, downloading my drafts and research notes months before I ever turned them in. But Brandon's cheating went way beyond just copying stuff. I found proof that he'd stolen work from his med school classmates, taking credit for group research, and publishing papers with work from other students that he never credited. One really bad thing I found was a case where Brandon stole early research from a fellow resident working on heart surgery for kids, then published it under his own name while his colleague was out on medical leave. The scale of Brandon's cheating was insane, but what made it truly dangerous was how he'd used stolen research in actual medical treatments. His fellowship at Massachusetts General was based on research that had fake data and stolen methods that were being used on real people. So on Christmas Eve, while my family was passed out from dinner and celebrating Brandon's big win, I was in my room working. I was putting together 7 years of proof into reports listing out every time he cheated with all the evidence, timestamps, and where I got it. I had screenshots of the real papers, the ones Brandon turned in, and even login records that showed he'd broken into different accounts, plus emails, proving he cut his partners out of any credit. I made separate packages of proof for the board at Harvard Medical School, the admin at Mass General, the state medical board, and the editors of 3 different medical journals that published his fake research. I tailored each package for who was getting it, making sure to point out exactly how Brandon's lies hurt them and their reputation. But the most important thing I did had nothing to do with exposing him. 6 months ago, when I first found out what he was doing, I knew my family would probably choose his side, not mine, so I started planning my escape. I'd secretly applied to transfer to Georgetown University's biochem program, using my own real research and grades to get in. And I didn't just get in. I got a full academic scholarship. The whole application process meant they had to check my work independently, so I knew Georgetown picked me for my real skills, not because of any mess Brandon made. To pay my own way, I'd taken a part-time research job at a drug company, working on real medicine while making enough to cover my bills. I'd been saving every single dollar for the day when my family would cut me off. I'd also found an apartment near campus and signed a lease that started on January 1st. Everything was set up so I could be totally free from my family's money and their mind games. As I worked all night, I felt sad but also free. Sad about the family I was about to lose, but free from living in Brandon's fake shadow for all those years. I wasn't just exposing a cheater. I was exposing a pattern of control and abuse that had messed up my whole life. At 3 a.m., I finished up all the reports. I set them to automatically send out at 8 a.m. on Christmas morning. I wanted my family to see what they'd caused before the school started calling. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice and saving myself. I also wrote personal emails to my aunts, uncles, and cousins with all the proof of what Brandon did. And I explained why I had to report him. I needed them to know this wasn't just some stupid fight between siblings. This was serious fraud that hurt real patients and honest researchers. When the sun started to come up, I packed my stuff carefully, taking only what I'd paid for myself or got as gifts from anyone but my parents. I left behind anything that screamed family money, needing a totally clean break from their control. My Georgetown acceptance letter was sitting right on my desk next to the papers for my scholarship, my new job, and my apartment lease. I wanted my parents to see that their threats to cut me off were just empty words, because I'd already set up my own life. By the time the sun came up, everything was set. In 3 hours, a bunch of emails would automatically go out, exposing Brandon's whole scam and starting investigations that would probably kill his medical career. My family was about to find out that their perfect little daughter had been planning her getaway for months and wasn't falling for their games anymore. I showered, put on some decent clothes, and went downstairs to make coffee. In a few hours, my family was going to wake up to a whole new world. One where Brandon's golden boy reputation was exposed as a complete lie, and I was done sacrificing my life for their comfort. The automated emails would handle the schools, but I needed to be there when my family finally figured out what was going on. I wanted them to see that their threats didn't break me, they just finally set me free from caring what they thought. As I sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee, watching the sun come up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, actual peace. Whatever came next, I knew I wasn't living a lie or covering for Brandon's con anymore. The truth was coming out, and I was ready for the fallout of choosing what's right over family. Brandon stumbled into the kitchen around 7:30, still in his pajamas with that smug smile of a guy who thinks he just played his entire family. He barely even looked at me as he went for the coffee pot, probably thinking I'd spent the night crying and getting my apology ready. "Morning, sis," he said, all fake and cheerful. "I hope you slept well and really thought about what we talked about. Mom and Dad are really looking forward to you saying you're sorry this morning. Maybe we can put all this crap behind us and have a nice Christmas." I watched him pour coffee into his favorite mug that Harvard Medical School won our parents got him for graduation. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who's never had to pay for his actions, someone who thinks his charm can get him out of anything. I did think about it, I said calmly, looking at my phone. 7:55. 3 minutes till the emails started going out. I thought about it all night, actually. Brandon nodded, pleased, thinking my sleepless night meant I was freaking out over his threat. Good. I know this was hard, but family comes first. We had to stick together, especially when outsiders try to make trouble between us. Outsiders. He was already changing the story, turning his cheating into some kind of attack on the family. The way he could lie to himself was insane. But I wasn't surprised anymore. At exactly 8 a.m., my phone lit up, buzzed, telling me the first email was sent. Then Brandon's phone went off. Then again, and again. He went from looking so cocky to concerned as his phone just kept blowing up. He glanced at his screen, and I watched his face change when he saw who they were from. Harvard Medical School, the Academic Integrity Office. What the hell, he muttered, and opened the first email. His coffee mug just slipped from his hand and shattered all over the kitchen floor as he read. You could see the Harvard logo right at the top of the email as his hand started to shake. Oh God, he whispered, scrolling. Oh God, oh God, oh God. More alerts kept popping up. Massachusetts General Hospital Administration, the Massachusetts Medical Board, the Journal of Medical Research, Editorial Board. Every single one was getting all the proof, all the files documenting 7 years of Brandon's cheating. I just sat there at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, watching my brother's world fall apart right in front of me. He looked up, pure horror in his eyes, finally getting what my calm, all right, really meant. Jessica, what did you do? He demanded, his voice turning into a scream. What did you send them? Before I could answer, our parents ran into the kitchen. They heard Brandon freaking out and the mug smashing on the floor. Mom ran right over to Brandon, stepping carefully around the broken pieces while Dad looked around, totally suspicious. What's going on? Mom asked, hugging Brandon as he just stared at his phone, shocked. She did it, Brandon said, pointing at me with a shaky finger. She actually did it. She sent everything to Harvard, to the hospital, to everyone. They're calling for an emergency investigation. They want me in Boston immediately. Dad's face got dark when he turned to me. Jessica, what is he talking about? I just pointed to the Georgetown acceptance letter on the counter with my scholarship papers and apartment lease. I sent proof of Brandon's academic fraud to the people who needed to see it. Harvard, his hospital, the medical board, and the journals that published his stolen research. You can't just take it back, Brandon said, desperately scrolling through more emails. You have to call them back. Tell them it was a mistake, that you made it all up. This is going to destroy everything I've worked for. Everything you stole, I corrected him quietly. Your career was built on other people's work, Brandon. The only thing being destroyed is the lie you've been living. Mom looked back and forth between us, trying to understand what was happening. Sweetheart, this has to be a misunderstanding. Brandon wouldn't steal from anyone. He's brilliant. He's always been brilliant. Mom, look at the evidence, I said, pointing to the copies of the papers I'd left on the counter. Timestamps, login records, side-by-side comparisons of the original work and Brandon's. 7 years of systematic fraud. Dad picked up the papers. Being a businessman, he always goes for the documents first. As he read the evidence, his face changed from angry to confused to just horrified. Brandon, he said slowly, these dates show that Jessica's research was done months before you published yours, and these login records show you accessed her university account without her permission. That's a lie, Brandon yelled, but his voice wasn't convincing. She's good with computers. She could have faked all this stuff to make me look bad. More alerts kept popping up on Brandon's phone. By now, every single institution was confirming they got my evidence, packets, and were opening initial investigations. The Massachusetts Medical Board was demanding a meeting right away to talk about suspending his license while they looked into it. Jessica, Mom pleaded, you have to fix this. Call them back. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding, that you were just upset and weren't thinking straight. I stared at my mother, this woman who spent my whole life ignoring my successes and cheering for Brandon's fake ones. Even now, looking at all this proof, she was asking me to keep up the lie that had defined our family. I can't fix this, Mom, because it's not broken, I said. Brandon stole research from me, from his classmates, from papers that were already published. He's been a fraud for 7 years, and some of that phony research has been used in medical treatments that affect real people. Brandon's phone rang and the caller ID showed Massachusetts General Hospital. He stared at it for a long second before answering with a shaky voice. Dr. Brandon, Johnson speaking. I couldn't hear the other side, but I watched Brandon's face get paler with every word. He just said, "Yes, sir," and "I understand," a few times before hanging up. "I'm suspended," he said, sounding numb. "Effective immediately. They want me in Boston by tomorrow morning for an emergency review. They're launching a full investigation into all my research and patient care." The kitchen went quiet, except for the sound of Brandon's phone still buzzing with new messages. Each buzz was another institution, another investigation, another piece of his fake empire falling apart. Dad was still going through the evidence, his mind piecing together what it all meant. Brandon, if even half of this is legitimate, you could face criminal charges for fraud. The medical board could pull your license for good. "Please tell me you didn't send it," Brandon whispered, looking at me with desperate eyes. "Please tell me you can still stop it." I met his stare. "Send what?" His face crumbled as he got it that everything was already sent, that all the schools were already investigating, that his career as he knew it was done. The golden boy, who'd manipulated our family for decades, was finally paying for what he'd done. Then Dad's phone started ringing. Then Mom's. Our relatives were starting to react to the evidence, packets I'd sent. They wanted answers, and they were shocked by Brandon's lies. Our perfect family. Christmas morning had just become the day Brandon's house of cards came crashing down. The kitchen turned to chaos as our parents tried to handle all the phone calls, while Brandon just sat at the table staring at his phone as more bad news piled up. The notifications just kept coming in. But I stayed calm. I'd spent months preparing for this exact moment. Mom answered her phone, and I could hear Aunt Linda's voice clearly from across the room asking questions. She was asking about the evidence packages she'd received. Dad was on hold with Harvard trying to talk to someone in charge who could explain what was happening with his son's career. Brandon looked up from his phone with pure panic in his eyes. "Jessica, you have no idea what you've done. This isn't just about me anymore. The hospital is looking into every patient who got treatment based on my research protocols. If they find any problems, people could sue us. Our family could lose everything. Maybe you should have thought about that before you stole research and used it to treat patients," I replied, my voice steady. "You spiteful little witch," he snarled, dropping his usual act of being the poor victim. "You've ruined everything because you couldn't handle being the family failure. This is all because you're jealous that I'm a success and you're nothing." Before I could even respond, Brandon's phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed Dr. Rebecca Martinez, his residency director over at Massachusetts General. Brandon's hands were shaking as he answered. "Dr. Martinez, I can explain." "Everything," he said desperately. "Brandon, put it on the speaker," Dad demanded. If this is about our family, we all need to hear what they're saying. Brandon reluctantly switched to speaker, and Dr. Martinez's crisp professional voice filled the kitchen. Dr. Mitchell, I'm calling to let you know that your residency has been suspended immediately until we finish a full investigation into academic fraud. We've received a ton of documents that suggest you've been plagiarizing and stealing research for years. Dr. Martinez, this is all a huge misunderstanding, Brandon interrupted. My sister is having some emotional issues, and she made up fake evidence to make me look bad. None of this is real. Dr. Mitchell, I've already looked over the initial evidence, including the login records that show someone accessing university databases without permission, and side-by-side comparisons of your work with the original sources. This isn't just a family fight. This is a serious case of academic and professional misconduct. Dad leaned closer to the phone. This is Brandon's father, Dr. Martinez. There has to be some kind of mistake. Brandon graduated with the highest honors from Harvard. He has always been an amazing student. Sir, that may be true, but the evidence suggests that Dr. Mitchell's amazing performance was built on stolen work. We've also discovered that the research he developed for patient treatments included methods that were copied from other sources. This could affect patient safety, and we have to investigate that immediately. Mom gasped. Patient safety. What does that mean? It means that if Dr. Mitchell used fake research to come up with treatments, and if those treatments were used on real patients, we have to check every single case to make sure no one got hurt. The hospital's lawyers are already getting together to deal with potential malpractice lawsuits. Brandon buried his face in his hands. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. Dr. Mitchell, you need to report to Boston tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for a formal review. You can bring a lawyer if you want. The Massachusetts Medical Board is also starting its own investigation. That could mean you lose your license for good. The call ended. The kitchen was dead silent. Mom was crying and Dad was just pacing back and forth. Brandon just sat there, not moving, finally getting how bad this was. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin Amanda. Holy crap, Jessica. I had no idea Brandon was stealing work. Grandpa is furious. He said he's proud of you for saying something. Then another text. This one was from my uncle, Stephen. Read the evidence you sent. As a researcher myself, I wanted you to know you did the right thing. Academic. Integrity is way more important than family drama. The rest of the family was getting my evidence, and they were shocked. But surprisingly, they were on my side. They'd all seen Brandon get the Golden Boy treatment for years, and now they finally understood why I had to expose the truth. Dad got off his call with Harvard and turned to look at us. His business sense was finally kicking in over his dad instincts. I just spoke with Harvard's Academic Integrity Office. They're treating this as the most serious case of systematic fraud they've seen in decades. They're thinking about revoking Brandon's degree completely. They can't do that, Mom protested. He earned that degree. No, Mom. He stole it, I said flat out. Just like he stole my research. Just like he stole from his classmates. Just like he's been stealing from everyone for 7 years. Brandon looked up. His eyes were red, but he was filled with rage, not sorry at all. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won something here. You've destroyed our whole family just because you're jealous. I exposed academic fraud that was hurting patients. I corrected him. If that destroys our family, it's because our family was built on lies. Our family was fine until you decided to play detective and ruin everyone's life. Brandon shot back. You're going to be the one to blame when Mom and Dad lose their house because of the legal bills. You're going to be the one to blame when I can't find a job anywhere because you trashed my reputation. Dad's phone rang again. This time it was our family lawyer, calling because Harvard had contacted him about a possible lawsuit. As Dad answered, I could see him starting to get it. This wasn't going away. He couldn't control it or sweep it under the rug. Brandon suddenly stood up, his chair scraping the floor. I'm going to Boston right now. I'm going to fix this before it gets any worse. How are you going to fix 7 years of documented fraud? I asked. I'll tell them the truth. That you've been mentally unstable for months. That you faked all this evidence because you can't handle my success. I'll prove that you're lying. I opened my laptop and showed him the screen. It was full of cloud storage folders with hundreds of documents, timestamps, and source files. Brandon, I have backups of everything stored in multiple places. The evidence has already been checked and confirmed. From other sources. You can't lie your way out of paperwork. He looked absolutely furious. Then I'll make you pay for this. If my career's over, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making yours miserable too. The act was finally over. The charming, successful doctor was gone, replaced by some guy willing to threaten his own sister just to protect his fake reputation. For the first time, I think my parents saw a little of who Brandon really was under that perfect image he'd built. Dad got off the phone and looked around the kitchen at his family falling apart. The lawyer says we need to get ready for a bunch of lawsuits. Harvard wants its scholarship money back. The hospital's looking into malpractice claims. The medical board could hit us with huge fines. Mom just sank into a chair, completely crushed by everything that was happening. How? How did we get here? How did it all fall apart so fast? I looked at my mother, the woman who'd let Brandon get away with this stuff for decades, and I felt both sad and kind of free. It fell apart because it was never real. Mom Brandon's success was built on stealing and lies, and our family's pride was built on celebrating a fake. Brandon grabbed his keys off the counter. I'm driving to Boston. I'm going to fix this. Brandon, you're in no shape to drive, Dad said. But Brandon was already heading for the door. I'll call when I've cleaned up the mess, Jessica maid, he yelled back. The front door slammed, leaving the three of us in the kitchen, surrounded by the proof of Brandon's lies and the ruins of our family. Outside, I could hear Brandon's car speeding down the street, racing toward a problem that he couldn't charm or lie his way out of. Brandon had been gone for an hour when the old landline rang. The bell cut right through the tense silence in our kitchen. Dad answered, his voice tired. Mitchell residence. He didn't have his usual confidence. Oh, Mr. Mitchell, this is Dr. Margaret Chen from Harvard Medical School's Office of Academic Integrity. A sharp professional voice said, I need to speak with you about your son Brandon's situation. Dad put the call on the speaker, his hand shaking a little. Yes, Dr. Miller, we're aware that an investigation has been opened. Mr. Mitchell, I'm calling to inform you that after an emergency review of the evidence we got this morning, Harvard Medical School has voted to completely revoke Brandon's medical degree. The scale and length of his academic fraud makes this the worst case we've ever seen in the school's history. Mom let out a choked sob, covering her mouth. I felt like justice was served, but I was also sad because I knew this meant Brandon's life as he knew it was over. Additionally, Dr. Miller went on, Harvard is demanding you immediately pay back all scholarship funds he received during his 4 years of medical education, which comes to $253,000 plus fees and damages. We see this as theft of educational services through fraud. All the color drained out of Dad's face. $253,000. We don't have that kind of money right now. The university understands that it's a financial mess. But Brandon cheated to get his degree. We have a legal duty to get that money back. Our lawyers will call you in the next 48 hours about paying it back. Arrangements. Then he hung up. We just sat there completely shocked. $250,000. Our family's entire future. My parents' retirement, maybe even their house, was all on the line because Brandon built his whole career on lies. Before we could even wrap our heads around it, Mom's phone started ringing. She looked at the screen and went pale. "It's Brandon," she answered, all nervous. "Brandon, how'd your meeting go?" Brandon's voice was on speaker, shaking and totally desperate. "Mom, it's bad. It's really, really bad. Harvard's not just looking into it anymore. They've already decided. They're taking my degree away." "We know, honey. Dr. Miller just called us." "No, you don't get it." Brandon went on, his voice getting louder. "It's not just Harvard. Mass General fired me. For good. Not suspended, fired. They're going over every single patient case I touched for the last 2 years. And that medical board meeting, I thought it was next week. They moved it up. It's tomorrow morning. They're saying I'm a danger to patients." Dad got closer to the phone. "What are they saying exactly, Brandon?" "They're saying I used stolen research to come up with treatments that they used on actual patients. They found 3 cases where people got medicine based on my stolen research, and one of them had complications. They think it might be because the dosage was wrong." Mom gasped. "Is someone hurt?" "Did you hurt someone?" "I don't know. The dosage math wasn't wrong in my papers, but it was wrong in the research I stole from. I didn't get the whole picture. A 70-year-old woman with a heart condition got double the right dose of a blood thinner because I changed the dosage instructions without knowing the math behind it." The kitchen went dead silent. We were just trying to take it all in. Brandon didn't just steal some homework. He could have actually hurt people using research. He didn't get to treat them. Where is this patient now?" Dad asked. "She's fine. They caught the mistake and fixed it, but only because some other doctor thought my plan was weird. If she'd stayed on that wrong dose for a few more days, she could have had some really bad bleeding issues." The hospital's lawyers are already getting ready for malpractice lawsuits. Brandon's cheating wasn't just about his career anymore. It had crossed a line into actually hurting people. The schools and the hospital weren't just protecting their reputations. They were protecting people's lives. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my contact at Georgetown. "Jessica, we heard about the Harvard thing. The school wants you to know your scholarship and your spot here are safe. Your own work speaks for itself. We're really impressed with how you've handled this." Then another text came in from my research supervisor at the drug company. "Hey, word's getting around about your brother's case. I just wanted you to know that your work with us has been great, and this whole thing just makes us even more sure about who you are." The medical world was reacting fast to Brandon's scandal getting out, but instead of making me look bad, his scam was actually showing how honest and independent I am. Then Dad's phone rang again. This time it was our insurance agent calling because the lawyers at Massachusetts General had called our homeowner's insurance about potential malpractice claims against Brandon. "Bill, I've got to ask you some tough questions," the agent said after Dad put him on speaker. "Your homeowner's policy has a little bit of professional liability coverage, but it's not made for covering major fraud or a bunch of malpractice claims. If the hospital sues your son, your own assets could be on the line." "How much are we talking about?" Dad asked. "I don't have the exact numbers yet, but medical malpractice suits can go from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, depending on how badly the patients were hurt. And that's not even counting the scholarship money Harvard wants back." When he hung up, we just sat in the kitchen with proof of Brandon's lies all around us. The reality of the money situation was hitting us hard. The house, their retirement money, possibly everything my parents had ever worked for was now on the line. All because they refused to see their golden boy for who he really was. Mom gave me this desperate look. "Jessica, you have to help fix this. You're so good with computers and research. Can't you just call these places and tell them Brandon made some mistakes, that he didn't mean to hurt anybody?" I just stared at her. I couldn't believe that even after all this, she was asking me to help cover for him. "Mom, Brandon didn't make mistakes. He stole research for 7 years straight and used it on patients. That's not a mistake. That's a crime. But he's your brother, she pleaded. Family is supposed to stick together. Brandon stopped being my brother the second he decided to steal my work and threatened to ruin my life to cover his tracks. I shot back. And you stopped being my mother the second you chose to protect his lies instead of standing up for me. Dad was just looking at his phone, probably running the numbers and trying to figure out how we were going to survive this financial disaster. Jessica, whatever Brandon did, this is going to ruin us. Your mother and I are going to lose everything we've ever worked for. For a second, I felt bad for them, even after all the years they played favorites. They were victims too, in a way. Victims of Brandon's lies and of their own need to believe him. I'm sorry about the money, I said, and I meant it. But Brandon did this, not me. All I did was report the fraud to the people who needed to know. It's not my job to save him from the mess he made. Then my phone started ringing. It was my grandpa, my dad's dad. He's a retired engineer who always pushed me to really think things through. Jessica, honey, I got your email with all those documents, he said, his voice soft but firm. I'm calling to tell you that you did the right thing. What Brandon did was fraud, plain and simple. It had to come out before he hurt more people. I could see my parents listening, hearing their own father back me up, Grandpa went on. I've seen this kind of stuff in engineering. When someone cuts corners or fakes data, people end up getting hurt. You probably saved lives by speaking out. After I hung up, I looked right at my parents, the people who raised me but never really saw me. Grandpa gets what Brandon did. Uncle Mark gets it. The whole family gets it. You two are the only ones still trying to make it seem like this is my fault, not Brandon's. The reality of their situation was finally hitting them. Their golden child was exposed as a complete fake. Their money was in jeopardy, and their family was falling apart. Everything they'd built their lives around was crumbling. But instead of owning up to the fact they let Brandon get away with it, they still treated me like I was the problem to be fixed. Brandon got back from Boston at 6 p.m. and he was an absolute mess. He stumbled through the door looking like he'd aged 10 years in a single day. His perfect look was gone, and his eyes were wild with desperation and anger. They're taking everything, he announced to the room where we were all gathered to talk about the family's money crisis. My medical license, my career, my reputation. It's all gone because my little sister couldn't handle being the family failure. I was sitting calmly by the window. I'd spent the afternoon taking calls from family and colleagues who all understood how serious Brandon's fraud was. My professors at Georgetown had called to offer support, and even a few of Brandon's old med school classmates had reached out to thank me for exposing his history of theft. Brandon, sit down, Dad said, sounding exhausted. We need to figure out how to handle the money side of this mess. The money side, Brandon laughed, and it was a bitter sound. We're talking about bankruptcy. Harvard wants its money back now. The hospital is getting malpractice lawsuits ready. The medical board is thinking about criminal charges for endangering patients. And it's all because Jessica couldn't stand that I was a success while she was a nobody. He turned to look straight at me. His whole look changed from despair to cold and calculating. But you know what? If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. I'm going to make sure everyone thinks you're insane. I'll tell them you've been obsessed with destroying me for years, that you faked all the evidence because you're crazy and jealous. Brandon, that's enough, Mom said, but her voice was weak. Even she was starting to see the ugly truth behind his perfect image. No, it's not enough, Brandon snapped. She destroyed my life, and now I'm going to destroy hers. He lunged for my laptop, which was on the coffee table with my Georgetown acceptance letter and scholarship info right on the screen. I'm deleting all of it. All your researcher evidence, all your precious Georgetown files. If I can't have a career, Then neither can you. I knew he'd try something. When Brandon snatched my laptop, I just pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. It showed all the cloud backup confirmations. It's all saved in a bunch of different places, Brandon. The proof has already been sent out everywhere. Smashing my laptop won't do a thing. His face just twisted with anger. He lifted the laptop over his head, about to smash it on the floor. But Dad and Uncle Mark, who'd gotten there an hour before, grabbed his arms and forced him to put it down. Brandon, stop, Dad said firmly. You're only making this worse. Worse, Brandon screamed. How could it possibly be worse? My career is gone. My life is ruined, and she's sitting there acting like she's some kind of hero for wrecking our family. The front door opened, and more relatives walked in. Aunt Linda, Cousin Amanda, and my grandparents had come over after they heard what happened. They looked totally shocked by Brandon's outburst and worried about the mess our family was in. Grandpa, who's 82, walked right up to Brandon and stared him down. Brandon, I've seen all the proof your sister gathered. You committed fraud for 7 years. You stole from students, from researchers, from your own sister. You put patients in danger with your lies. And now you're trying to destroy Jessica's property because she had the guts to tell the truth. Grandpa, you don't get it? Brandon started, but Grandpa cut him off. I get it perfectly. I'm a retired engineer. I know what academic fraud looks like. And I know what happens when liars make decisions that affect other people's safety. What you did was criminal, and Jessica was right to report you. Brandon looked around the room at our family, hoping for some sympathy, but all he got were looks of disapproval. Even his aunts and uncles, who'd always praised him, were finally realizing his success was all built on lies. This is unreal, he muttered. My own family's turning on me because of her lies. They're not lies, Brandon, Aunt Linda said gently. It's documentation, evidence, proof of years of theft. We've all read what Jessica sent. It's clear you've been stealing work for a long, long time. Then Brandon's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his face went white. It's the police, he whispered. The whole room went quiet as he answered the call. It was a short conversation with Brandon, mostly just saying, "Yes, officer," and "I understand." When he hung up, he looked at all of us, his eyes wide with what looked like pure terror. The Boston police want to interview me tomorrow about criminal fraud charges. Harvard filed a formal complaint saying I stole my education through fraud. They're treating it like a felony. The room was dead silent. Criminal charges meant Brandon could actually face jail time, not just lose his job. The whole thing had just blown up from family drama into a serious legal nightmare. Brandon, Mom said quietly, maybe you should call a lawyer, too. Gasps. With what money? He snapped. I just lost my job. Remember, I can't afford a criminal defense lawyer right now. Trying to pay back Harvard and fight off malpractice lawsuits. My Uncle Mark, who'd been quiet the whole time, finally spoke up. Brandon, I think it's time you owned up to what you've done, instead of blaming Jessica for turning you in. Take some responsibility. Brandon's voice cracked. I'm 25 years old. My life is over before it even started. All because my sister couldn't stand being the failure in the family. My cousin Amanda, getting her own PhD in chemistry, stood up and faced Brandon. Your life isn't over because Jessica reported you, she said. Your life is over because you committed fraud for 7 years. You lied to patients who trusted you. Thanks, Amanda, I said softly. It meant everything to have family who understood what was really at stake. Brandon looked around the room one last time, seeing only disappointed faces, where he always used to see admiration. His whole image as the perfect golden child had just shattered, leaving only the mess he'd made and the price he had to pay. But I'm fine, he said, his voice totally empty. Everyone thinks I'm the bad guy. But remember this moment when our family is destroyed. When Mom and Dad lose their house, when all your lives are ruined. Remember that Jessica chose to wreck all of this instead of protecting her own family. He walked to the door, then turned back to look at me one last time. You think you won something here? You didn't. You just made sure that nobody in this family will ever trust anyone again. You destroyed all of us for your so-called principles. With that, he left, driving off into the December night, while we all just sat there trying to process what had just happened. Grandpa came over and sat by me, putting his worn hand on my shoulder. Jessica, honey, you did the right thing. It was hard and it cost you, but you protected people who could have been really hurt by Brandon's lies. That takes real courage. I looked around the room at my family and saw they understood. They were supporting me, not rejecting me. They knew I had to choose the truth over just being loyal, integrity over keeping things comfortable. But I also saw my parents on the couch looking completely lost and crushed by the fact that everything they believed about us was a lie. Brandon's scam had hurt them too, even if they couldn't see it yet. The golden child they had raised and protected for 25 years was gone. He was a fraud who'd played them just as easily as he'd played the schools. Everything they'd invested in him had cost them their financial security, maybe their family too. For the first time in my life, I felt truly sorry for my parents, even as I knew that exposing Brandon was the only choice. 6 months later, I was at Georgetown University's advanced biochemistry lab prepping solutions for my research on new cancer treatments. Through the window, I could see the Washington, D.C. skyline, a view that felt like a new start. It reminded me every single day how far I'd come from that horrible Christmas morning. My research was going better than anyone ever thought it would. The protein synthesis stuff that Brandon stole from me was now being turned into real treatments under my name and my watch. 3 different drug companies had already talked to Georgetown about using my work, and I was getting pushed right into the school's MD PhD program with a full ride. And yeah, I saw the irony. Brandon stole my work to build a fake career that completely fell apart. Meanwhile, my real research was opening doors I never even dreamed of. I guess the truth always finds a way out, even when it's buried under a pile of lies and games. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Amanda. Just saw the news article about your cancer research. Mom sent it to everyone. She's finally bragging about you for a change, not Brandon. About time, right? Things with the family had completely changed in the last few months. At first, my parents blamed me for Brandon's mess and all their money problems. But as the court case went on and everyone saw just how deep Brandon's lies went, they started to get what I'd been trying to tell them. His criminal trial was a huge wake-up call for everybody. The proof they showed in court wasn't just about him stealing my work, but a whole thought-out plan of lies that put patients in danger and scammed a bunch of institutions. The prosecutor called Brandon a master manipulator who had taken advantage of everyone's trust, from his own family to the people he worked with. In the end, he pleaded guilty to fraud. He got 2 years of probation community service and had to pay back the money. His medical license was taken away for good, and he was banned from ever working in healthcare again. Harvard agreed to a smaller payment plan that'll take my parents 15 years to pay off. But at least they got to keep their house. Brandon's now working as an insurance adjuster in Pittsburgh, living in some tiny apartment, and going to therapy the court made him attend. From what the family says, he's slowly starting to admit how much damage all his lies caused. And even though him taking responsibility is a long, hard process, the biggest change that surprised me was my parents. After months of family counseling and some really tough talks, they started to see how they'd enabled Brandon's behavior for years. Mom actually sent me an apology and a letter admitting she played favorites for years and saying she was sorry for ignoring everything I'd done while she was cheering on all his fake successes. Dad was even more direct about taking the blame. During one of our monthly family dinners, which we'd started again in March, he looked me right in the eye and said, "Jessica, I failed you. As a father, I was so blown away by how successful Brandon seemed that I ignored his bad character and your real accomplishments. I'm sorry it took a criminal trial for me to finally see the truth. Hearing that meant more to me than any praise Brandon ever got. My parents were finally seeing me for me, not just as Brandon's less successful sister. My whole family had my back through the whole mess. Grandpa came to every big presentation I gave at Georgetown. He was so proud when I talked about my research. And Uncle Mark helped me deal with the professional fallout from Brandon's fraud, even introducing me to colleagues who could give an honest opinion of my work. The biggest thing I'd learned was that standing up for what's right, even if you lose people, leads to better, more real connections. The family who stood by me when I reported Brandon's fraud were the ones I could really trust with anything. Relationships based on the truth were so much stronger than the ones built on protecting lies. My phone buzzed, pulling me away from my lab work. It was Dr. Rebecca Martinez from Mass General, the doctor who'd fired Brandon 6 months earlier. She said, "Jessica, I hope I'm not bothering you. I got your number from the Georgetown research office. I just wanted to call and thank you for your courage in exposing your brother's fraud." I walked away from my experiments to take the call. "Dr. Martinez, you don't have to thank me. I just reported what I saw." She said, "You did way more than that. Your proof helped us find 3 other residents who were working with Brandon on his fake research. We've changed our whole system for academic honesty because of you. You probably stopped patients from getting hurt by speaking up when you did." She went on, "I also wanted you to know that your reputation in the medical research world is fantastic. When you apply to med school, I'd be glad to write you a recommendation letter. The field needs more people like you." After we hung up, I thought about how this whole mess had actually helped my career instead of hurting it. By choosing the truth over my family, I showed the kind of character that schools and hospitals are actually looking for. Brandon's lies were a test for me, and passing it opened up a lot of doors in the science world. My supervisor, Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, walked over to my desk smiling. "Jessica, I just got the news. Your paper on protein synthesis pathways was accepted for publication in the Journal of Molecular Biology. That's a huge deal for an undergrad researcher. It was the same journal that published Brandon's fake research. Now they were publishing my real work. The irony was pretty sweet, but more than that, it proved my work was good enough on its own. And there's more," Dr. Rodriguez said. "The National Science Foundation wants to interview you for a story they're doing on academic honesty and research ethics. Your case is being used as an example in grad schools all over the country. I never meant to be a poster child for doing the right thing, but I was proud that my story could help other students find the guts to report fraud when they see it. If Brandon's downfall could stop this from happening again, then at least something good came out of our family's crisis." My phone buzzed with another text, and this time it was from Brandon himself. We'd been sending a few messages back and forth since his therapy got him to start taking responsibility for his actions. He wrote, "Hey, saw the news about your NSF interview. I'm proud of you for building a real career on actual work. I know I have no right to ask, but thank you for not giving up on the idea that I could be a better person. Therapy is helping me get how badly I hurt you and everyone." His texts were still awkward and kind of all about him, but they were real progress from the guy who threatened to destroy my life 6 months earlier. I'd learned that forgiveness doesn't mean you have to make up, but it does mean letting go of anger that'll just poison your own future. I texted back, "I hope you keep growing and find ways to do some good. Take care of yourself." As I got back to my research, I thought about the big lesson that came out of our family's crisis. Enabling bad behavior just ends up hurting everyone, including the person you're protecting. By refusing to cover for Brandon's fraud, I gave him the chance to face reality and maybe become a better person by demanding the truth. I gave my parents the chance to have real relationships with both of their kids. The whole thing was painful, but it made everyone grow. Brandon was learning to be accountable. My parents were learning to see their kids as individuals, and I was learning that I didn't need anyone's permission to fight for truth and justice. Dr. Rodriguez handed me the official acceptance letter for my research paper. And as I read my name listed as the lead author on groundbreaking cancer treatment research, I realized this moment was everything Brandon's fake achievements never could be. A real accomplishment based on real work, real talent, and real integrity. My phone rang one more time. It was Mom calling from the grocery store. Jessica, honey, I'm at the store and I saw a magazine article about young women in science. Your research was mentioned as one of the most promising new things in cancer treatment. I bought 10 copies to send to everyone we know. For the first time in my adult life, my mother was bragging about my actual achievements instead of Brandon's fake ones. The whole family dynamic had totally shifted. It made space for me to be seen and liked for who I really was. Thanks, Mom. That means a lot. Sweetheart, I know I've said this before, but I want to say it again. You were right to report Brandon's fraud, even though it was so hard for us. You protected patients and stood up for things that matter more than family comfort. I'm proud of you for having the courage I didn't have. After we hung up, I stood in my laboratory surrounded by the equipment and research that was my real future. Through the window, the sunset painted the Washington sky gold and purple. It was beautiful and real. I had learned that sometimes protecting the truth means sacrificing relationships. But the crazy thing is insisting on the truth is what often leads to deeper, more honest connections. My family was smaller now, but it was more genuine. My career was built on something real, not something stolen. I still had my self-respect because I picked what was right over getting their approval. The golden child who ran our family for decades was gone, but in his place, everyone got the chance to be their real selves. Brandon could learn to be accountable. Our parents could build a real relationship with both of us, and I could chase my dreams without living in his shadow. Standing in that lab, holding my first big published study, I got it. The most important when wasn't Brandon going down, it was me coming up. By refusing to play along with his scam, I made space for the truth. By choosing what was right over what was easy, I built a foundation for real success. That Christmas morning that felt like an ending was actually a new beginning. The moment I said fine to my parents' ultimatum and chose my own path. It started a chain reaction that changed not just my life, but my whole family's idea of truth, accountability, and what it means to really achieve something. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to stop enabling someone's bad choices, even if it costs you that relationship. Sometimes the truth matters more than protecting feelings, and sometimes standing up for what's right, even if you're all alone, is the only way to be truly free. I went back to my cancer research, knowing that every discovery I made would be built on hard work, honest effort, and something I actually earned. Brandon had accidentally taught me that success built on lies is just empty. A real accomplishment earned with integrity and by not giving up was worth way more than any fake praise. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a message from Georgetown's medical school admissions. Congratulations. Your application has been accepted with a full scholarship for the combined MD-PhD program. Your excellent research and proven integrity make you exactly the kind of doctor and scientist our field needs. I smiled, looking around my lab one more time before going home. Tomorrow, I'd keep building a career based on truth, surrounded by people who cared more about being real than looking good. The future was wide open with possibilities that were all mine. The golden child was gone, but the real daughter had finally found her place. Before I end this, I want to ask you all, have you ever been in a situation where doing the right thing meant risking a relationship you cared about? How did you find the strength to choose honesty over just keeping things comfortable? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Thanks for listening to my story and for supporting anyone who chooses the truth over the easy way out. If this story hit home for you, please like this video, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share this with someone who might need a little encouragement to stand up for what they believe in. Remember, real success built on truth always shines brighter than any achievement built on lies. Take care of yourselves, and don't ever be afraid to speak up.